Hi there, and welcome to another episode of 401 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm Justin,
I'm Danielle.
and tonight we're going to do another VC Andrews theory video on what did Corrine know? And for the record, I do not think a character's name is misspelled within the novels more than Corrine's. In Garden of Shadows, Petals on the Wind, and even within Flowers in the Attic, as neighbor Jim Johnson calls out to Corrine. I have gone with the version that is most common and I believe to be most correct in the thumbnail, especially as I believe it is the version that is always used with the grandmother, and I would not want to anger Olivia. But what did Corrine know from the letter she received? How much did Corrine know about the kids being locked up until the grandfather died ahead of time? Versus, like later on in Petals on the Wind, saying that she did not realize until weeks after the kids were up in the attic. This is one that has been on our list for a really long time, but, recent requests have come up that have kind of rekindled this. Dinara Safina 6 months ago asked us to do a following theory about did Cora know the kids were going to be stuck in the attic forever when she brought them to Foxworth Hall? Did she know that her father's will specified that if ever they were discovered, would they be disinherited? That, did she really mean to get them out? So this is definitely a theory we wanted to do for a long time, but that definitely pushed it forward, and I'm very excited to get to discuss this one. Now, we do try to vary up the families we discuss, meaning we want to do Laundry and Castile, but there are just so many Dollanganger episodes. So we just did My Sweet Audrina, so we try to give you some variety, but there's just so many in the Dollanganger ones that I'm always just dying to discuss and know. So this is another one, and we'll jump right in. But Danielle, what are your thoughts? Do you think that Corinne knew beforehand that her kids were never going to be coming down from the attic?
Absolutely. She is somebody, in my opinion, and maybe we'll disagree on this, I'm not sure, but I think she thought she could get her way out of it when she finally got there. I really do believe that she thought she could win her father over. But she already probably should have known how he was back then, that once he puts his mind to something, he's going to get his revenge. Here's the money, Corinne, but I'm going to make you not have your children because I know you have them because I have a detective who I sent out right after you ran away. So I think she had hope that she could change his mind, but it was never going to happen.
I think that's a good point. I think that we all think of Corinne when we look back at the villains in Virginia Andrews Land. Corinne is definitely at the top of most people's list. And I think it's easy to think like she's this nefarious, dastardly, sinister villain. But I think she's definitely dangerous. And one of the ways we can be the most dangerous, which I think you were about to kind of say, is by being stupid. And I think that, Kathy calls her out all the time as being stupid, being stupid. And I kind of think she is. Corin is kind of stupid, and that can be very dangerous. I think that Corin's a liar, and I think the problem is that the person Corin lies to the most is Corin. I think that Corin knows the truth, knew right away. I mean, you think about it. I can't imagine the grandparents, even though they kind of sent separate letters, or this was on one page, this was on another page. I can't imagine they had any qualms being completely clear and not mincing their words with Corinne about what was going to happen. So it's hard to think that she didn't have some idea of that.
Exactly. I completely agree with you in that sense. I mean, there's little sprinklings throughout the series of whether she knew or not. One that really has always stuck out to me is her saying, enjoy it while you can, enjoy outside while you can. There's some kind of line. I remember that line distinctly in Flowers in the Attic. It just stuck out to me, and I'm like, why is she saying that? When you first read it the first time, you're like, and then as you go back and reread it, you're like, oh, she knew. Like, absolutely. I really truly think, though, that she thought she could win him over.
I agree. I think, if we look at when she receives the letter, I don't agree necessarily. Like, I think she knew, but was in denial about it. Like, if you look at the letter when she's reading it in Flowers in the Attic, she gets the letter, she starts crying, but then they kind of describe Corinne sits the children down, and basically Kathy observes, as I watched, I saw her soft, fair, dressed in face turn into something cold, hard, resolute. A cold chill shivered down my spine. Maybe it was because she stared at us for so long, too long. Then she looked down at the sheets held in her trembling hands, then to the windows, as if there she could find some answer to the question of the letter.
Love it when he reads to me. I hope you guys enjoy it just as much as I do. But
Thank you. But what's basically being said there is that Corrine looks to be struggling with what is going on in the letter, and I think that what happens, I think she made a decision in that moment. I think that she hoped she could change her parents' minds, but also that she decided in that moment that if it came down between the money and her children, she was going to choose the money. I honestly think, though, that she did love her children. I do think that she hoped she could change Olivia and Malcolm's minds. I think, though, that she was making a side decision that, but if I can't, then I'm not going to be poor. I'm going to
well,
treat my
but
family.
even still, like money clouded her judgment. You couldn't find another way. It was like Bart said in Petals on the Wind. Like we could have figured it out, Corinne. Like why didn't you just say something, right? It was that stupidness or
Hmm.
lack of trying to problem solve the situation. I'll just kill my kids. What?
Yeah, well, I think we live in a world with a lot of people like that, that look at the world we live in now. I think that people think they know that nobody wants to be thought of as stupid. So in an effort to prove that they're not stupid, they will do these risky, crazy things. And unfortunately, it just proves that they are stupid because it's hurtful and dangerous to other people. And I think Corinne's one of those people. She, like speaking of Petals on the Wind, she does say like everybody thought I was just this dumb blonde. But even as she describes her plan, like, oh, I'll poison my kids one by one. That's dumb.
Yes.
That's dangerous. So even if she meant to get them out, and I do think that she thought she could get them out at some point, but like you referenced with the walking and
Hmm.
like so they are on the train, they get off the train and they're walking to Foxworth Hall. There's a moment where Corin does say, Lord knows they better walk outside while they can. And it's another chill that Kathy gets down. But I think a line like that definitely indicates that Corinne knew that beforehand what the plan was in keeping them locked up. And I think that that's further supported by the scene preceding that when she's reading the letter. She knows what's in this letter. She knows her parents. Now, again, on that line with being stupid, we kind of discussed this the other day. I think that she made such an assumption about her mother versus her father. I do think that there would have been a chance if she had worked on Olivia a little bit, because that maybe this could have all been resolved, because ultimately Olivia knows that the kids exist and still was planning to leave Corin everything in the will, in Olivia's will, which she did. So I think that if, Corinne had just let her own pride go a little bit, and instead
Corinne was
of
just an idiot.
right, exactly. I do think that, again, she's one of the worst villains, worst in terms of really evil, does horrible things, but I think it's because she's stupid. Like, I think that that could be the most dangerous thing. But yeah, I do think that she knew ahead of time that the grandparents had no intention, especially the grandfather, of letting the children out. But I think she hoped that she could convince it. But like again, Corinne's a liar, and she's the biggest liar to herself, but she lies about everything. And I believe that once you start telling lies, you start to get lost in this labyrinth. You start to get lost in one lie after another, and
Well,
you
yeah.
start to not even be able to tell what the truth is anymore.
I
We've
was just gonna
discussed
say
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend once who would tell me lies, and at some point, the lie was no better than the truth, so you might as well just told me the truth, and instead now I can't trust you.
Right. And if Corinne had been honest with Kathy and Chris,
Hmm.
she probably would have got a little bit more understanding or patience,
Yeah,
or maybe some better ideas on how to solve the problem, right?
right.
Chris was very smart. Kathy's very smart. Like, they could have been like, well, let's do this. We can go here. We can do this.
Hmm.
She didn't trust her kids enough.
Yeah,
She wanted to take control. And I think that money just got to her.
yeah.
Money and power goes to your head. It went to her head. She's like, I'm unstoppable now. It doesn't matter what I do. And she got very selfish.
Well, I think that there's a part where Kathy observes that Kathy and Chris are discussing that when you are in the home of your parents, no matter what age you are, you still feel like a child. And yeah, I'm sure that's very intoxicating. Whereas, like, Corinne got to play at being an adult from the ages of 18 or 19 to 32, 33, whatever age she is. And so now it's like, oh, okay, the real world came in and it was dark and horrible, so now I get to be a kid again.
Mhm.
And so she was torn. I do think that again that she did. There was a period, at least in the book, in the '87 film, you could argue that the plan, because the sugared donuts or cookies in that one, um, came up right away. Or, in the Lifetime version, they gave, Heather Graham played a very manic, she was a very manic character. But, like, in the book, I do think that Corinne loved her kids, and you see this in scenes where she's up in the attic scrubbing and helping them, and Kathy says that's like when she loved her mother the most. But also, and Sylvia Coffey, here's a screenshot here, also asked at one point if we thought that she went to the secretarial school. I do think that that's true, and I do think that it's another example of like Corrine knew that it was unlikely. She knew beforehand that the kids were not going to be able to get out, but she had still hoped maybe for a chance. And then that's one of the instances where she realized, okay, if I'm going to be able to live with myself, then I've got to at least try. And if you think about it, Corinne's a liar, but she's not that creative. And she does have very specific details about the school, like the name of the teacher having this huge bosom, the guys in the class. So I do think that she did really go to the secretarial school, but I think that's only because, again, subconsciously she knew that if she went through with the plan of getting rid of her children eventually, she could at least live or tell herself at the end of the day, I did everything I could. I did try.
Yes.
I just couldn't,
She
succeed at
dropped
this.
right out of secretarial school. And she's like, yeah, I'm not doing
Right.
this. And oh, I tried, but I couldn't do it.
Hmm.
Again, she's not credible, but there is some truth in her storytelling to the kids.
Yeah.
And I think we agree on that. Yeah, she did go to secretarial school, but she probably just was like, after day one, was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. I got money. I don't need. Yeah, I just think she got there and she was like, yeah, I'm not doing this the rest of my life. I'm just going to kill my kids instead. So I think, like, I agree with you. For a while, I think she was trying to find solutions and she did really love her kids. But after a while, when she couldn't find a solution, it was kind of like, this is all I know. I'm going to have to kill them and live with it. Again, dumb idea, but we do generally think she knew, she loved the kids, she realized she couldn't do it. Instead of being accountable that she couldn't do it, she just tried to kill her kids and didn't tell them.
Well, I also think that Bart factors into this. I think that if she had just, met some guys or whatever that she didn't fall in love with, she still may have been a little bit more dedicated to the secretarial school, etc. But I do think that once Bart came into the picture, she knew that there's no real way she's going to be able to explain this. Because when you tell a lie, you paint yourself into a corner, and it's sort of like, well, Corin's a very selfish person and she wants what she wants, and she wants Bart and the money more than the kids. So what's going to weigh out? Okay, Bart and the money. But I do want to discuss in Petals on the Wind. Corinne says in Petals on the Wind that the grandfather knew the whole time, and it wasn't until a few weeks after that Corinne realized that, which I think could be an argument that Corinne did not know. However, in that whole scene, Corinne saying, I didn't know until a few weeks after, and at that point I was trapped. What can I do? But I was rereading it right before we were filming, and I'm like, it never really. I think it's an interesting argument, and I do think that the grandfather knows, or we had a whole theory on this. I think you can go either
Yeah,
way,
did the grandfather
right?
know?
But if you believe Corinne in this situation, or I think that there's like half truths. I think that it's possible the grandfather did know, and I know that there's the argument out there of Olivia in Garden of Shadows. But what I always say, and I've commented on a few of these, the unreliable narrator. We're hearing a story from one limited point of view, and it could be that Olivia thought she was telling the truth, that the grandfather never knew. She intercepted the detectives and she only knew. But Malcolm was a very powerful guy, and Dale and I are best friends, but I don't know everything that you do all day, every day. You don't know what I do all day, every day. Like, people live lives, so it's very likely that Olivia thought, and from the story Garden of Shadows, is that the grandfather did not know. But that's only from Olivia's perspective. You have to take in the unreliable narrator. Well, in this situation, Corinne in Petals on the Wind, we already know she's a liar and an unreliable narrator. So she says, wasn't until a few weeks in that the grandfather admitted that this was a trap the whole time. But when you get to the end of that section, Bart and Kathy don't believe her. And Kathy even is like looking at the grandmother, and the grandmother's like shaking her head or indicating that what Corinne's saying is a lie. Now, again, the grandmother, from her perspective, could have just thought that Kathy or that Corinne was lying. But I will take into effect, or I like to factor in, Bart and Kathy did not believe this. And I think that it could have been true that the grandfather admitted to Corrine after the fact, but I don't think it changes that Corrine knew beforehand.
Correct.
You know, again, I just can't imagine, and this isn't something I give it a lot of thought to, but it's the thing that keeps sticking back to me. I just can't imagine that the grandparents we know, whether they were writing on separate pages or not, were gonna like be very unclear. Like, I feel like they would be very clear. Hey, if you bring them, they're not getting out of the attic, or hey, this is the plan. So, but I do think that Corinne could have worked on the grandmother.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Because the grandma did, throw out flowers in the attic, the kids give her a gift. Like, even though I think she could have came around in a different situation. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you there.
Well, I would have been like, hey, kids, ask grandma to help you pray. Or, I feel like if they
Yes.
had like worked together to get the grandmother to share in, again, the kids shouldn't have had to, but, to like, for survival purposes, I would have been like, hey, let's show the grandmother that we do believe we're sinful and need to repent. I do think Olivia would have come around.
Absolutely. And I think, and again, this is, the perspective of who's telling the story, but at the end of Garden of Shadows, it tries to tell, they try to tell you Olivia kind of was excited to see the grandkids, and
Right.
John Amos was the one who was
The
like
influence.
their devil
Right.
spawn. So I think, like, I agree with you. Olivia could came around. It
Yeah.
was already there. The idea was already in her head.
Yeah.
She just got brainwashed by John Amos.
I think that they got to a point of no return though. Like
Yeah.
after the first few months, it wasn't going to happen. But I think if Corinne had gone in with the approach of like, let's try and work on your grandmother a little bit, then I think that it could have maybe worked. But I think like after the first few months, there was no return. But yeah, I do think because she had to steel herself and all this, but she did give them the plant and the flower. She was never going to love them, but at least could have maybe been like, okay, they're humans. They want to, we
Well, and if
want
we
to
look at Olivia,
get through it.
she thought she was doing something good for them. Like, she
Hmm.
did. She thought she was teaching them God's ways.
Yeah.
So I don't think she punished them very evilly, but I don't think she, would have, she thought she was doing right by them by teaching them her religious ways. So I do think she could have been swayed at some
If
point.
with that route, yeah. But to answer the initial question, do we think that Corinne knew ahead of time? I think so. I think that she knew and then went into denial mode about it. I think that she loved her kids, but I do think based on the just the initial pages where you're reading Corinne and her reaction to the letter, the way she kind of stares at the letter, stares at the kids, and then she kind of becomes cold. Something in that letter told her like you're making a choice here between your kids or money. And I think that again, she went in thinking she could change their minds. I think that she went in hoping to get her kids out of this. I think she loved her kids at this point. But I think that in that moment, what's between the lines in those pages is that she is saying, as much as I love my kids and I hope I can get them through this, if it comes between me and them and the money, I'm choosing the money.
Well, and I think too, part of that lifestyle, and I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And Justin and I are very realistic people. But she maybe did have intentions of, like you said, being a secretary, getting
Yeah,
some of the money as a temporary solution and then getting everybody out,
yeah.
right? And when she realized, oh no, I like this luxury lifestyle, I don't want to do this, she was like, oh, now I'm going to sacrifice my children.
Well, and I think putting Bart into that too.
And
Like
that
I
too,
think that
correct,
that's
yes.
it was all at that same time that she was sort of like, well, I'm never going to be able to tell Bart, so I might as well quit secretarial school and all that. I think again it's because by the Christmas party that we know that they're starting a relationship, her and Bart that first year, and that would have been right when she was giving up on the secretarial courses. So
And humans are complex creatures. We can change our minds,
yeah,
things influence our
yeah.
decisions. So yes, we think she knew it from the beginning, but she hoped that it wouldn't be permanent.
Yeah.
And when she had to make a choice, she decided to offer children.
I think that's true. Yeah. And I do want to just piggyback onto that like, yeah, that's how we read it right now at this age. A year from now, we might change our minds. Quick edit. During editing the episode, I realized that we did not specifically speak to the grandfather's will and whether or not Corinne was aware of the codicil before or after she officially decided to go the arsenic route. Danielle and I are in agreement that we believe that, whether true or not, Corinne convinced herself that she would get the kids out once the grandfather died, and the will changed that. We think that her love for Bart also factored in, and we think that she was in a sort of limbo because Corinne was kind of stupid, and trying not to deal with reality until she had to. So, we do not think that she had officially decided to do away with the children until the will was read. We think that she did not plan to tell Bart about her children ever, but still would maybe find a way to get them out and put them somewhere away from Bart, etc. But once it was official in the will that she could not ever have kids or would lose everything, Corinne would not take the risk. And that's when she finally had to act with the arsenic, which would also solve her problem with ever having to tell Bart. But we think that she may have had thoughts about getting rid of her kids if she had to before the will was read, like we discussed in the episode, but the will was the final straw, and that is when Corinne officially decided. But what did you all think? Do you think that Corinne knew right from the beginning that the kids were going to be up there and, maybe forever? Or do you think that what she said in Petals on the Wind was the truth, that she had no idea and she was trapped? Again, I think that there's clues. Again, the way she reads the letter, and the other big clue is when she says they better enjoy
now.
walking it outside while they can. I think those are the two big clues that she definitely knew. And based on the characters of the grandparents, I can't imagine them not being very clear in their letter to her of like, this is going to happen.
Exactly.
But let us know what you all think. As always, it was fun getting to chat with you all. We hope to have some VC Andrews related content coming out soon. Till we talk to you next time, have a good one. Bye. John Amos